What's up, YouTube? So in this video, Stephen A. tries to defend his words against how he says that Tony Romo should be an NFL head coach because he announced the AFC Championship game with the New England Patriots versus the Kansas City Chiefs, in which he did a good job. But Stephen A. is taking it to the next level and saying that since he did such a good job that possibly he should be able to be an NFL head coach because he was calling out the plays before they happened. He was calling out defenses and offenses and what certain players should do and why they should do it. He just overall did a good job. So Stephen A. feels that he should be an NFL head coach. Let's listen in on how he tries to explain himself and defend himself against everybody else.
So you had this take yesterday is why I wanted to bring it up to you. You think Tony Romo should be a coach?
I think easily. He'd be better than anything the Dallas Cowboys have to offer or have offered us over the last 20 years or so. Think about it. Outside of Bill Parcells, tell me one coach that you can definitively say would do a better job than what Tony Romo could potentially do. He knows the game. He played the quarterback position. And I mean this sincerely from the bottom of my heart. In all my years of watching football, I've never seen a football analyst do the job that I saw him do this past weekend. He was absolutely.
So Tony Romo did do a good job. I don't want to take that away from him, but that's kind of basic. He's an NFL quarterback who was an NFL quarterback for years. So he should be able to call out defenses and offenses and have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen before it happens. So there have been other previous ex-NFL quarterbacks that have gone into the booth and started commentating. Joe Montana was there. Troy Aikman, I think he still announces. Steve Young was an announcer, commentator. Dan Fouts. There's been a couple of ex-NFL quarterbacks that were able to do the same exact thing, call plays before they happen, call out what players were going to do, and just have a good overall feeling of what's going on in the game. It's because they were ex-NFL quarterbacks. Now, does that transfer over for them to be head coaches and to get in that type of department? Probably not. But, being an ex-quarterback, you should have a good idea of what's going to happen before it's going to happen or what players should be doing. So let's just listen on more to what Stephen A. has to say.
Phenomenal. He was calling stuff before it happened. He was talking about what you should do. Not only that, what they were going to do here. He was circling it on the chalkboard. I've seen the only time that I've experienced that in my professional career in 25 years as a journalist is when I was sitting in the booth in a suite with Magic Johnson during the Miami Heat Dallas Mavericks series. And for a quarter and a half, Magic Johnson called every single play that the Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks were going to run back and forth. And I was sitting right next to him and literally watching him be that basketball savant. That's what I saw from Tony Romo this past week.
What do you think?
I agree with Stephen A., but also Dallas Cowboy fans beware, because Stephen A. isn't rooting for them.
I'm not.
Okay, so for him to say that, it made me look deeper and be like, is Stephen A. creating some level of curse indirectly for the Dallas Cowboys? And by the way,
so what Jalen's talking about is it is well known that Stephen A. does not like the Dallas Cowboys. He absolutely hates them, and he has no problem letting you know that he doesn't like the Dallas Cowboys. So for him to say that Tony Romo did a very good job in commentating the game and that he should possibly be a head coach for either the Dallas Cowboys or for another organization, that means a lot. That means a lot because he does not like the Dallas Cowgirls at all.
I actually heard Will Cain say this a couple of years ago when Tony Romo was retiring, that he should be their head coach.
He did.
And he did do a terrific job calling the game. I agree he would fit in for a couple of different reasons. One, he's a part of the family. Two, Jerry Jones is not going to bring in a head coach that everybody feels like he's the powerful figure and a decision maker, which is why I've been a person that's been saying this for decades. This is why Jimmy Johnson isn't in the Cowboys Ring of Honor.
Correct.
And also it's well known that Jerry Jones absolutely loved Tony Romo. He treated Tony Romo like a son. He gave him a huge contract before he even made his first playoff game. It took him years to get to the playoffs, and when he finally got the first round, he choked. Tony Romo was a huge choke artist and still made a lot of money off it. So Jerry Jones definitely loves Tony Romo, and I couldn't imagine what it was like behind closed doors when he had to put Dak Prescott ahead of Tony Romo. I know Tony Romo was having a lot of injuries and a lot of issues going on, but Jerry Jones absolutely loves that man. And I bet you had a hard time putting Dak Prescott in front of Tony Romo. But it was just that time because Tony Romo was balling. Dak Prescott was balling. Tony Romo was hurt. So it was just time. It was time to make that move.
Just think about that for a second.
Understood. But let me go back for a minute here, because yes, I agree that he was able to call all the plays and it was magnificent. He made it fabulous to watch, and I was extraordinarily impressed. Yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean he could be a great coach, right? I mean, there's so many other things that go into coaching besides knowing what the play is going to be when you're watching on television.
See, when I made my comment about Tony Romo, it wasn't just based off of, his excellence as a broadcaster, but it was also piggybacking off of what we witnessed from the Dallas Cowboys. Think about it. Scott Linehan was dismissed. Yeah. Finally, we've been knew that should have happened a couple of years ago, okay? Jason Garrett was a guy that was a former offensive coordinator, but you ain't calling plays. Now you talking about calling plays. Well, what the hell took you so long? You should have been doing that. Yeah. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about the puppeteer status in terms of, okay, Jerry Jones is the president, the GM, and everything, the de facto coach. So we wonder what kind of cachet that he has. When you look at a quarterback like a Tony Romo and the kind of influence that he could potentially have on men, that's where it resonates. I'm not trying to imply that somebody knows more football than the other. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that Jason Garrett doesn't know football. That would be disrespectful, and I'm not.
Now, I kind of agree with Stephen A. with Tony Romo being able to lead men because he was the edge quarterback for them. But at the same time, being a head coach is going to be a little bit more than what he had to deal with. So he just dealt with many of the things on the field with players here and there on the field. But being a head coach, you're going to have to deal with players' different personalities. You're going to have to deal with players getting arrested. You're going to have to deal with players getting DUIs, beating up their girlfriends, just not wanting to play because they want more money. Deal with players holding out. Then you got to deal with coaching staff and all the issues of getting you right. Defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators. I mean, you're going to have to deal with the whole myriad of things. And plus, that's only if you're winning. But if you're not winning, what are the type of things you're going to have to deal with? Dealing with the fans, you're going to have to deal with the press, you're going to have to deal with, a whole myriad of things that you wouldn't have to deal with if you're just a quarterback. There's a bunch of other things that are going to come your way.
Going to do that to him as much as I despise the Cowboys fan base and as much as I applaud their misery at every turn. I'm being very, very serious here. I think when you look at Tony Romo and the quarterback position and what it entails, the knowledge that's required to come along with the position, I think that listening to him, he sounds like he would be a great coach.
As if by magic, Dominique Foxworth has just appeared at our table here and can chime in with an opinion. Dominique, Tony Romo, coach of the Cowboys.
I just couldn't take it. No, he can't be a coach of the Cowboys.
Why not?
What he did calling plays is something that a lot of players could do. I think quarterbacks could certainly do it. A lot of players can do it. That doesn't mean that you could be a head coach. And also, the example that Stephen A. got, Magic Johnson did it throughout.
I do like how Jalen got up and gave that man his props. I'm happy Mr. Fox came on there, Foxworth. And he is correct. There are a lot of quarterbacks that can't do that. They can get up in there in that booth and call out plays and call out defenses and offenses and schemes and things that you should and shouldn't be doing. And most likely before they happen. You should be able to do that if you were an ex-pro quarterback. Like I said, Joe Montana did it. Steve Young did it. Troy Aikman did it. Danny Fouts did it. These were all ex-quarterbacks that got into commentating and were able to do all the things that Tony Romo did. So that's not really an indicator of whether or not you should be a head coach. I mean, it helps. It definitely helps, and it looks good. But Mr. Foxworth is correct.
Quarters, he was a terrible basketball coach. So being able to predict those plays doesn't mean that you can be a coach. And I don't think that Tony Romo can. Also, Jason Garrett, good coach.
First of all, don't get on my nerves by misconstruing what I'm saying, y'all. I'm not saying that because the man sounded great in a booth on a Sunday afternoon, that qualifies him as being the head coach. We understand that there's more that goes to it, number one. Number two, Magic Johnson, you could say that he was terrible. Nobody's going to refute that. But that was because you're a superstar player. There's expectations that you have. And so that doesn't vibe with the marginal players that you have to coach, particularly individuals that were getting paid more than you ever got paid. And as a result, you know what? They're not giving max effort. So that kind of frustration came into the equation. Then we have to take into account what we're talking about from the Cowboys. I didn't sit up there and tell you that Tony Romo would be the second coming of Bill Belichick or Bill Parcells. How difficult would it be to exceed what you have seen from the Cowboys? Let's pump the brakes for a second here. 3 playoff victories in 25 years. Do I think a coach has the potential to pull that off? Yes.
I actually think it'll be very difficult. They are the only team in the NFC to be as successful as they have been over the last 5 years. They have won the division, made it to the division round 3 times in the last 5 years. I think Jason Garrett has been a very good coach.
That is insane.
So can we go back to if it's not because Tony Romo is calling out the plays in the booth, what is it that makes you think he's going to be a good coach?
No, what I'm saying to you is that
he's going to be better than Jason
your
Garrett.
knowledge of the game combined with your ability to relate to players who are playing today resonates with me. I'm going to pay attention to that. And number 2, what I'm saying is, how much do you really have to achieve to be better than what the Dallas Cowboys? Now, I'll give you credit. You've been consistent in terms of your praise for Jason Garrett. I have no idea where it's coming from, but you have been consistent with it.
Coming from the fact that they lost their quarterback and he went 13-3.
That's not fair.
That is good.
Okay, you can say
with
that.
Third round quarterback.
Okay, that's what you got. You know what I got? Before that 13-3 season happened, the man went back-to-back, 8-8 seasons, lost the last game of the regular season with a division title on the line. And how many coaches would have kept their job losing 3 years in a row with a division crown on the line, and you lost not just to one team. It wasn't like the Toronto Raptors losing to LeBron James. This was the Dallas Cowboys losing to the Giants 1 year, losing to the Redskins another year, losing to the Eagles another year, back-to-back years. He shouldn't have even got to a point where he had a 13.
Maybe that's true, but that's all irrelevant. This coaching job is about what have you done for me lately, and lately they've won the division 3 times.
I do not agree with Mr. Foxworth on that. Your record as a head coach that is very relevant, especially when it's contract time, especially when it's time to renew whether or not you're still going to be with us. Going 8-8 for 3 seasons in a row, that's 500 right there. And then your last season, you do what they just did or what they did. So that gets you on the hot seat. You are definitely on the hot seat. And it's what management, what Jerry Jones wants to do with you. But that is very relevant. Your record is very relevant as a head coach.
In 5 years, he went 13-3 with a backup quarterback. Not very.
Well, you're saying it's irrelevant. You're saying it's irrelevant. I say no because my position has been clear since then.
Right. So this year he was bad at the beginning of the year, and they came on strong late in the year. They changed the things that they were doing, and they got better.
Oh, by the way, because of their defense, with his signature is offense.